All right, we'll say good morning, a good tevach. Sorry, we're getting started a few moments late. My apologies. It's great zechus, Baruch Hashem, to begin the new week together, to thank all of our sponsors. Also, we have a record number of K'nai Nahar Baruch Hashem sponsorships, which is really beautiful and heartwarming. So first of all, our annual TALMUD Torah sponsorship, the Tilson Family from Am Yisroel, for dedicating all the Shir and Drushos of 5785 Tafshin Pei Hey as zechus for besuros, tovos for Am Yisroel. Incredible. Our TALMUD Torah sponsors for the month of Cheshvan Haba Aleinu L'Tova. Baruch Hashem, there are a number of them. Steve and Teri Czinn, in honor of the birth of their sixth grandchild, Devorah Eliana Czinn, and in memory of Dr. Czinn's father, Bunim Tzvi Ben Chaim, Shmuel Robyn Korobkin, as a zechus refuah for Rabin's cousin, serving in the IDF, Benyamin Chaim Pesach, ben Musha Chana, and cremation of the Yahrzeit of Rabin's mother, Pesa Mira Bas Chaim. Dr. Moshe and Ellen Gavant, in memory of Dr. Gavant's parents, Yakov, Meir ben Moshe Leib, and Shena Bas Abba. Dr. Behzad and Yemina Soufer of Los Angeles, in the merit of a speedy recovery and full recovery of Esther Bracha Bas Chaya from Los Angeles, a young child in critical condition after sustaining burns. From Simcha Torah, we hope that she should just have a complete and enduring refuah. Our week of learning sponsors, Rabbi and Natalie Amirian, in memory of Dr. Naid Neely Esther Bas Malek Zichron Bracha, on the occasion of her Yahrzeit. The pastries today are dedicated by Dr. and Mrs. Milt Gertner in honor of the arrival of their new granddaughter, Mazel Tov, Shchayach and Chavra. A special Mazel Tov to Steve Golaskov on his engagement, to Jordana Herschel. Steve is on Zoom with us. Steve was still there, unless he just got off. Here he is. He came back on. He was Baruch Hashem, Mazel Tov. So a tremendous simcha. Emer Hashem. Tremendous. We wish the chassan in college, it's bracha, mazel, hatzlacha. What a beautiful and incredible way to begin. Mar cheshvan emir Hashem. What a beautiful way to take the absence of the simcha that Yamim Tovim generate, and Baruch Hashem create some additional simcha of our own. Chassan in college, bizoch emir Hashem to build the Am Yisroel ad mea ve'esim shanim tovos. Also, we dedicate our learning in the zechus of the return of our hostages, in the zechus Emir Hashem of the hatzlacha of all of our soldiers. B'chol ma'aseh yadehem. It's been a difficult week of losses for Klal Yisrael. So many young and beautiful and holy soldiers, literally again giving themselves for Kedushas Eretz Yisrael, Am Yisroel, and Emir Hashem for us. Cheshbon Baruch Hu should give an aliyah to their neshamos. Cheshbon Baruch Hu should give nechama to their mishpachas, and halavai they should be successful. B'chol ma'aseh yadehem. And so with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Kuf Lamed Aleph. We are at 131. We are picking up in Meir Hashem a lot to do today. 2 lines down from the top. Boy Rava. So remember again, right now we are hyper focused on the position of Yochanan ben Beroka. So Yochanan ben Beroka introduced the Mishnah. The Mishnah went ahead and reinforce something that we learned before, which is that halacha l'maisa, if you go ahead and you make a t'nai which runs contrary to Torah law. So let's say again, you want your children to inherit in a way that the Torah does not outline, so such a t'nai is batal. That is not a unique halacha here. That is a general halacha that says masna mashakasa b'Torah to know batal. If you go ahead and you make a condition that runs contrary to Torah law, your t'nai, your condition is batal. It is negated. It is void. So I'll say again, I can't say enough. This is such an important piece in estate planning. If you want your estate divided a certain way, whether it's that you have a bachar, but maybe you want all of your children to inherit equally, or you have daughters and you want your daughter to share in your estate after 120, like your children. If you want your family to divide up your estate in accordance with halacha and not make them in violation of anything, or yourself posthumously in violation of anything, you have to plan ahead. There are halachic mechanisms to do this, as we've seen. Essentially, again, you go ahead and you create a gift that takes effect before you die. And again, good estate lawyers, or from estate lawyers, even not from estate, People who know these things, but it is incredibly important to do this while you can, so that your estate is divided up in accordance with halacha. Otherwise, again, the worst thing a person could do, can you imagine what happens? A person leaves an estate very well-meaning. They want their children to share, they want their daughters to share, and meanwhile, again, you're in the Shema standing before the Kisei Shalmala, before HaKadosh Baruch, before the Beis Din Shalmala, and they're dividing up your estate, not in accordance with halacha. It is not a good thing. I would assume it's not a good thing to stand before the Beis Din Shalmala, and they're dividing up your estate down here. HaKadosh Baruch is like, right? You don't want that head nod from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Beis Din Shalmala, and it's easy enough. You just have to find an estate attorney who knows how to do it, and Baruch Hashem, you can allow your children to share however you want them to. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka gives an interesting idea. Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka writes, he says that halacha l'maisa, essentially what you do have the ability to do is you could shift the stream of inheritance, and you could go ahead and allocate inheritance to someone, as long as that person is in your inheritance stream, as long as they're in your inheritance line. So the lashon of the Mishnah was, Im Amar Amisha Ra'i Liyarsho, if you go ahead and you say, I want my son to inherit. And of course, my son is someone who stands in the line of inheritance, Dvarav Kayamin. Then ultimately, again, his statement works. But if you say about someone who can't inherit you, then the words don't work. So in other words, what Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka is saying is like this, that again, I will say, I just want to point out, the assumption that we're working under is that Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka's concept really applies with someone who's a Shchiv Mira. So someone is dying. Now again, this is not a gift, because remember again, when it comes to gifts, what's the halacha? When it comes to gifts, what's the halacha? You can gift anything to anyone you want, and that does not contravene halacha at all. So if a Shchiv Mira is on his deathbed and he says, "I want to go ahead and gift all of my estate to the person behind the counter at Goldberg's Bagels because they were so nice to me the last time I went," again, not a good idea, but Lamaisa, you could do that. You could do whatever you want as a gift. That's not what Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka is talking about. He's talking about over here that somebody is lining up inheritance. But the way they're doing it is, they're going ahead and they're saying, person will call him, Avram is a Shchiv Mira, and now Avram says on his deathbed, I want all of my estate to go to Yishmael. Now he has a Bachar Yitzchak, but instead he sends to Yishmael. Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka says, that works. Why does it work? Now remember again, I just want to chaz this over. Why does this work? We saw this in yesterday's daf. What's the answer? What's Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka's svara? What's his svara? It's a pasuk. Biyom hanchilo es banav. The Torah gives a right to a father to allocate inheritance to his sons. The way Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka understands this is, as long as the person you're allocating to is someone who is fit for inheritance, you can reallocate. You can redistribute the wealth. Right? You can go ahead and assign the inheritance to one particular son, as long as that person is in your inheritance chain, and as long as you're not contravening Torah law. So remember again. So for example, what can't you do? You can't take away pishnayim. From a bachar. Right? You can't do it because that's a Torah law. But for example, let's say again, Avram has multiple sons, and Avram wants one of his sons to inherit. He doesn't want the other sons to inherit. So again, he could go ahead and allocate all of the inheritance to one of the sons. Biyom hanchilo esbanov gives a father that power. That's Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. Okay, now with that, let's go. Bye, Rava. Bebari heich. Okay, so now, as you just mentioned before, Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka's entire concept is predicated on the father being a Shchiv Mira. Would such a concept work if he's totally healthy? Okay, so Avram is doing his estate planning, and he decides, you know what? Actually, let's go with Yakov. Right, Yakov's doing his estate planning. He's got multiple sons, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Let's assume for a moment right now he has a daughter, Dinah, who is the firstborn. So there's no Bachar over here. There's just multiple sons. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka's model is when Yakov is on his deathbed. He's a Shchiv Mira. But let's say, what if he's totally healthy? According to Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, can healthy Yakov go ahead and allocate all of his estate to one of his sons? So the Gemara says, Kikim Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka b'Shchiv Mira debar orisihu. So on one hand, we can say maybe Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka only did this by Shchiv Mira. Why? Because the Shchiv Mira ultimately, again, is literally ready to bequeath. Now, why is he ready to bequeath? Why? He's about to die. Right? So in other words, since Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka's entire concept is predicated on the pasuk biyom hanchilo es banav, right, on the day when ultimately again he will convey inheritance to his children. Maybe the concept only works when the inheritance is ready to be conveyed. When is the inheritance ready to be conveyed? Ultimately, again, when Yakov is ready to die. But if Yakov, Baruch Hashem, is totally healthy, maybe he can't do it. Dilma, filo babari nami, or maybe not. Maybe not. In other words, maybe Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka is espousing a concept. What's his concept? His concept is a father has a right to distribute his assets how he wants to. And even as inheritance he can, as long as the allocation is taking place to people who are in the stream of inheritance. Okay? So Musha Chana says, that's our kasha. That's our kasha. So assuming we accept the concept of Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, that a father has the ability to allocate to bequeath his estate to one of his children or multiple children in a way that he wants, as long as they are in the line of inheritance, is that only a din when he's on his deathbed, or can he do it even when he's healthy? So that's machlokes. I'm Rabbi Shashia, the Rava. So Rabbi Shashia said to Rava, Tashma, Dharma Rabbi Nasan, Rabbi Shnehem, Shnisem, Mishnaschem, Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. So listen to this. So Rabbi Nasan said to Rabbi, you established your Mishnah like Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. Which Mishnah are you referring to? An interesting case. This nan. Lo kasev la benin dichrin diyahabin lech minai. So both say, before we go into this, remember there's the concept of ksuvas benin dichrin. What's ksuvas benin dichrin? That a man says to a woman. So let's say Yakov is marrying Rachel, right? So Yakov is marrying Rachel, and in the ksuva, Yakov writes to Rachel that your ksuva will be inherited by your sons. In other words, we've seen this concept before, that this was all done. Let me give you the background to this, right? A father is always nervous to leave property to his daughter. Why? Because she's going to marry a guy, right? And she's going to marry that guy, right? She's going to marry a guy, and what's going to happen? The potential is that he's going to inherit her. Now, if he inherits her, that means essentially. Now, let's say again, a father has a daughter marries a guy, right? And daughter predeceases guy, which now means that guy inherits daughter, which now means that the property that was once in the father's family is now in guy's family. So a father would be reticent to give his daughter property. So therefore, again, what ends up happening? Chazal instituted this concept called ksuvas benin dichrin, which means the ksuva of the male sons. What does it say? It essentially says like this, that a husband guarantees his wife that whatever she's bringing into the marriage will be inherited by her children. Now, what does that do? Now, even though her children, will be, let's say, have the same tribal affiliation of her husband, which may not be the same thing as her father, but a father at least feels a greater level of comfort knowing that his grandkids, his grandchildren, will have the property from his daughter. So this is called ksuvas benin dichrin. We've seen this many times before. So Moshe says, listen to this. What happens? So now Yakov marries Rachel, and Yakov didn't write in the ksuva this benin dichrin clause. Lo kas of law benin dichrin di yahavin lech minai. He didn't write for her the following clause: any male sons that you have from me, inon yarsun kesav ksuva seich yoser al chalkeon di imachiyun. Your sons will inherit your ksuva. Now, by the way, it's not just any property she brings in, it's also the value of her ksuva, right? They'll inherit your ksuva, the property you bring in, and by the way, this is above and beyond anything they inherit from the rest of the estate. In other words, whatever they inherit from the estate, they inherit from the estate. Above and beyond that, our sons will inherit your ksuva. Let's say he didn't write that. Nevertheless, chayiv shetnai bezdinhu. Ultimately, again, they're chayiv because it's T'nai Beis Din. I both say, now, what is that? Now, in our context, what is that? That's Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. Because what is a father essentially doing? What is he doing? He is allocating inheritance. He's allocating inheritance to sons. And he's allocating inheritance to certain sons over other sons. Now, remember again, technically speaking, who inherits the wife? If the wife dies, who inherits her? Her husband. Right? Technically. This says, what's happening over here? Husband is saying to his wife, I'm allocating that to our children, to our sons, to the sons that we have together. And I will say, so what is this an example of? This is an example of inheritance allocation by a father. And what's the state of the father? Healthy. What do you see? What is this? So this is Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, that you could allocate inheritance to sons however you want to, as long as they're in the chain of inheritance. And what do you see from here? it's happening even when the father is healthy. So this seems to be a raya that Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka's concept doesn't just apply when the father is ill, sheleima, but it applies even when he's healthy. Now, interestingly enough, Rabbi said yisbun tanan. Rabbi said, no, don't read this as an inheritance, but rather read this as a gift. Yisbun, if you take a look at the Rashbam, the Rashbam says yisbun tanan v'divrei akolhi. Right? Yisbun means a gift. No, don't read this as inheritance. Rather, what is this? This is a gift. This is a gift, right? So halacha l'maisa, again, we're gifting side. Now, and I remember again, what's the beauty of a gift? What's the beauty of a gift? Again, you can give to whoever you want, whenever you want, however you want. See, interestingly enough, Rebbe came along and said, don't read this as an inheritance, but rather read it as a gift. V'amar Rebbe, and listen to this. Now, after Rebbe said this is incredible. V'amar Rebbe, yaldus haisabi. I acted a little immaturely, right? V'hi'asti panai b'nasan abavli. And I went ahead and I was a little bit chutzpahdik to nasan abavli. Ella d'kai malan. So in other words, what Rabbi was saying afterwards was, I might have spoken a little bit too soon. Right? I might have spoken a little bit too soon in changing the girsa of that Mishnah. Ella d'kai malan. Benin dichrin lo tarfa mishubadi, but yet we also learn that you cannot collect ksuvas benin dichrin from the chasim mishubadim. Meaning, let's say during the course of the marriage, right? So again, the husband, we call him Yakov, went ahead and sold off some of the property. Now Rachel dies, so the kids can't collect sold property chasim mishubadim for the ksuvas benin dichrin. Now let's analyze this. I don't understand. If it's a gift, then they should be able to collect it. Because if it's a gift, then it's theirs. Retroactively, it's theirs. Rather, it must be that what? It must be that, in fact, it's not a gift, but rather what? It's an inheritance. So we'll say, if we bring this full circle, so what do we have over here? Remember, what was our kasha? Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. What does Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka say? Haloch l'maisa, father has the ability to go ahead and redistribute inheritance however he wants, as long as the people who he's redistributing to are in the chain of inheritance. Beautiful. Mishnah sets it up as the father's shchivnei when he does this. Gemara asks, can you do this even if you're healthy? The Gemara brings a raya that the answer seems to be yes. Yes, based on what Rebbe said. What did Rebbe say? That even if you didn't write the ksuvas benin dichrin clause in the ksuva, it's as if it's there. It's not based in. But what is ksuvas benin dichrin? Essentially, it's an allocation, right? A redistribution of inheritance property. And when is it done? When the father is totally well. What does that show you? That shows you that halacha l'maisa, Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka's concept applies even when the father is totally healthy. And I will say, the interesting part is even Rebbe said, no, it's not the Yerusha, it's a gift. It's a gift. But then what happened? Rebbe did tshuva, so to speak, right? Rebbe say, I acted a little bit impetuously, right? It's actually the lashon over here is quite fascinating. Yaldos haisa, I acted immature. Rebbe says, so sometimes, what's the greatest form of immaturity? Speaking too quickly, right? We know this as we get older, right? As we get older, we recognize that you could save yourself so much tsar and agmas nefesh and sound a lot more intelligent if sometimes I wait to respond. Right? Wait a little bit. Let me hear everything. Let me ingest everything, and then afterwards I'll go ahead and respond afterwards. So it's almost like you see, like Rabbi said, no, it's not Yerusha, it's a gift. And then he's like, no, I was wrong. It is Yerusha, because if it was a gift, then the children should be able to collect from the Chasim Mishubadim. The fact that they can't collect from the Chasim Mishubadim indicates to us that, in fact, it's a Yerusha. Incredible. So this seems to be a raya that Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka's concept applies even to a healthy individual. So Rabbi Papa said to Abaye, 1 second. Bein Laman Amar Yisbun, Bein Laman Amar Yarsun. So we'll say, so now, it's always great about Gemara, right? Well, what you come, and so we'll say, it's interesting. Fascinatingly enough, when you start Gemara, one of the most frustrating things about Gemara is, this is a safe space, you could say it, right? It's like, stay on point, right? Stay on point. We started a conversation, right? Why can't we finish this up. It's like a lot like marriage, right? Why can't we just let's finish this topic right now, and then we'll go on to something else afterwards, right? And what's beautiful is that afterwards you come to appreciate it a little bit. Because what it becomes a little bit is like a kid in a candy store, right? What happens to a child in a candy store? I remember one of my greatest memories when my children were little was going to the shuk on Erev Shabbos, right? Like they have those candy stores. You won't find them in America because we have a health department here, right? But in Eretz, right? Those open air candy stores where everything is. And there's no gloves or tongs or anything like that. You get in there. It's a Klal Yisrael experience. But what's beautiful is like, if you ever watch the eyes of a child, right? They walk in, they're like about to think, and then they catch a glimpse of this and catch a glimpse of that. And suddenly again, there's no idea like where to go or what to do. And the sheer excitement of it. I think as you get older, Gemara becomes a lot like that as well. That the frustration of like going in a million different directions actually becomes a tremendous source of excitement. Because you never know where you're going to go, and you never know where you're going to end up. And the Gemara brings up this really to prove a different point, but then it seizes on this and it extrapolates on this, and your head is spinning, and I don't know how to follow it. But it's like the kid in the candy store who is confused and a little bit frustrated because I don't know which candy to take, but is so excited because everything is so beautiful and everything is so delicious all around. This is our spiritual candy store. And the beautiful part of it is, unlike the actual candy store where there is going to be a parent who tells you enough, right? Let's say here, it's more and more and more. It's all you could eat. It's all you could ingest. It's all you could fill yourself. And just when you think you're full, there's room for more, right? And just when you think you've gotten to the bottom of the, receptacle, there's always more. It never runs out. So we'll say, so now the Gemara brought up Ksuvas ben Dichrin. So the Gemara says, here's the problem. Only a problem Abaye. Here's the problem. Bein Laman da Amar Yarsun. Bein Laman da Amar Yarsun. So now, go back to Ben Dichrin for just a moment. So now we'll say, it seems like there's machlokes about how Ksuvas ben Dichrin works. Is it a gift? Is it a gift? Or ultimately, is it a Yerusha? So whether you say it's a gift or a Yerusha, ha'in adam makne davar shalal bal yolam. Here's the problem. You can't give over something, right? You can't bequeath something that doesn't exist. Now, watch this. This is fascinating, but I know what you're thinking to yourself. You say, but it does exist. Watch this. Even Rabbi Meir says you can bequeath something that does not exist. And we'll say, watch this. This is fascinating. There's a bigger problem with Ksuvas ben Dichrin. What's the problem? Now the property exists. What doesn't exist? The kids. Remember, this is a ksuva. When is a ksuva written? When the couple's getting married. So listen to this. And the Gemara says, I don't think even how does this mechanism work? Even if you hold that you could be makne adavar shalo bali olam, that assumes that the acquirer, what's the better word? The recipient. Thank you. Right? The recipient exists. In other words, Rabbi Meir says you could be makne adavar shalo bali olam. You could go ahead and bequeath something or give over something or. It's not transfer. It's your. You could transfer a future right. You could transfer a future right so that even if it doesn't exist, as long as the recipient does exist. But even Rabbi Meir would agree that in this case, how can you do it? The recipient doesn't exist. So how can you call it a gift or how can you call it an inheritance? The recipient doesn't exist. If the recipient doesn't exist, then at the end of the day, how does this even work? Ella Tanai Bezdin who? Rather, Ella Tanai Bezdin Shiny. Hachanami Tanai Bezdin Shiny. To which the Gemara says, you're right. This whole thing is different. What is this called? This is called the Tanai Bezdin. Rabbi said, what does the Tanai Bezdin say? Remember again, there's a concept. Tanai Bezdin essentially says as follows. There is, in the world of halachic finance, the most important principle that we operate with is Hefker Bezdin Hefker, which means Bezdin Halacha has control over all monetary matters. And what that means is that halacha has the ability to create financial realities. That's the bottom line. So does this concept of Ksuvas ben Dichrin work in accordance with normative financial frameworks? The answer is no. Because how can you be maknis something to someone who, by the way, not only is someone who doesn't yet exist, but what? Someone who may never exist. Who says they're going to have children? And if they have children, who says it's going to be boys? Right? So there's so many variables in this. But rather, again, tonight Behzad says, this is how it works. This is how it works. This goes in the ksuva, and this leans, so to speak, ultimately again is there. So we'll say, so by the way, once you say this, then the truth is, it's not really a proof anymore, right? See, you almost have to extract this from the conversation because you're dealing with just a different set of facts. So because this is a different set of facts, we thought this was a fantastic ride. We're very excited about this. Very excited about this. I could feel the excitement in the base mention about this. Right? Next, we'll say, so we thought this was very excited because at the end of the day, we thought this went ahead and answered up Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. It turns out that it doesn't. Fascinating discussion, but it doesn't really have an impact on what we're talking about. Amar Leib. 1 second. Amar Leib, Mishum de kamafik lebi yarshi yarsin. So the Gemara says, Amar Leib, Mishum de kamafik lebi yarshi yarsin. Fine. Hadar Amar Abaye, lav milsihi da Amri. Abaye says, no. Don't go ahead. Don't go ahead necessarily. And I'm sorry. Hadar Amar Abaye, lav milsi. Let's strike that from the record. The Gemara says, da Amri, lav milsihi da Amri. This nan, lo kasav la, watch this. Lo kasav la binan nukvan di haven lechemina yahavinan. Sorry. Lo kasav la binin nukvin. We'll say there is another parallel gezerah. What's the parallel gezerah? Technically speaking, the Ashram points out that technically speaking, a father is not obligated to support his minor children after a certain age. We saw this in Ksuvas. Right? But again, halacha l'maisa, it is important for a father to support his minor children. And specifically, Chazal, we're even more concerned about daughters. So there's a concept called binos nukvin, and binos nukvin essentially says that a father agrees to support his daughters until they get married. That was written in the ksuva as well. So watch this. Disnan lo kasav la bin. Let's say right. Yakov marries Rachel, and he did not write the binon nukvin clause in the ksuva. So lo kasav la binon nukvin di yahavin lechiminoy yahavin yasum v'esiv yisazim in chasai ad yischalk ad detilka ad detilak in the guvrayin. Let's say he didn't write in the ksuva this clause. What does the clause say? Any daughters we have together will ultimately remain in my home and be supported from my estate until they get married. Let's say you didn't write that clause. Chayiv. Ultimately, again, right? So Yakov is still chayiv to go and honor that. Why? Shu Tanai Bezdin. Because this is a Tanai Bezdin. Right? Again, halacha l'maisa, like we just said before. So Gemara says, Shu Tanai Bezdin. V'hava la zebe matana ula zebe yerusha. So maybe, so Moshe says, now watch this. So now, this is fascinating. So the Gemara is going ahead, and the Gemara now is linking these two things. We have Benin Dichrin and Binos Nukvin. Right? So Benin Dichrin is the allocation of the mother's ksuva to her male children, and Binos Nukvin ultimately is the agreement of the father to support his daughters until they go ahead and get married. So now, remember again, that halacha l'maisa, we said before that as much as ksuvas benin dichrin is a Tanai Bezdin, and Tanai Bezdin is really a separate concept, but nevertheless, the reason why it is applicable for our conversation is because it is phrased belashon Yerusha. So we have benin dichrin that is phrased as a Yerusha. And now, interestingly enough, the Gemara says we have benos nukvin. Now, how does benos nukvin work? So we'll say, interestingly enough, how does it work? It's a matana. So watch what's happening, right? Because it's not a Yerusha. Why is it not a Yerusha? Because he didn't die, right? Because remember again, let's say again, no trick question over there, right? In other words, right? It's not a Yerusha because the father is alive. Well, remember again, don't get confused. It says, the father says, I agree to support them from my estate until they get married. The reason it uses that lashon is because in the event that father dies, his estate will take care of them. But while he's alive, essentially it's an obligation to support my daughters until they get married. Fine. So watch this. Get ready for this. So now I have two takanos. Just follow the train of thought over here. I have two takanos. Benin Dichrin, which is at least framed as a Yerusha. Right? Because halacha l'maisa, first of all, number one, it is a Yerusha, right? Why is it a Yerusha? Because it's only activated by death, right? In other words, it only takes place after the mother dies. So it is Yerusha. In other words, and it's phrased as a Yerusha, right? We're not phrasing it as phrased Yerusha. Granted, the Gemara says, but it's not a real Yerusha. because again, the recipients, right, aren't even alive at the time that it's made. You're right, it's a Tanai Beis Din. But it's a Tanai Beis Din that is framed as Yerusha, okay? That's part one. Then I have Benos Nukvin. What's Benos Nukvin? It's not a Yerusha. If it's not a Yerusha, right, and it's not an obligation, then what is it? It's a gift. It's a matana. Okay, get ready for this. Get ready for this. So now the Gemara says, so essentially what I have is like this. V'havi lezem matana. So essentially to the girls. So now we'll call it Yakov has sons and daughters. So for his daughters, in the Ksuvi, he has to write Benos Nukvin. That's a matana. Ulezeh, and for the boys, it's a Yerusha. Okay, I'll say, pause here for just a second. Remember we had this? That halacha l'maisa, if you make a transfer to two people of two parcels of property, to one you say it as a matana, and to one you say it as a Yerusha. What's the halacha? Or at least according to the bottom line opinion, the halacha is the whole thing is framed as a matana. Right? Even if you don't have transactional singularity, right? You heard it here, right? Transactional singularity, right? So even if you don't have that, as long as matana is mentioned somewhere in the context, then halacha l'maisa everything becomes framed as a matana. Watch this. So now the Gemara says, okay, so now let's get down to business over here, right? Yakov is getting married to Rachel. He's writing in the Ksuva, and even if he doesn't write in the Ksuva, it doesn't matter because it's a Tanai Beis Din, so it's included anywhere. So which means when a man gets married to his wife, there are two things that automatically occur. Number one, Ksuvas benin dichrin. That's Yerusha. Number two, Benos Nukvin, which is a matana. So you've got two transactions occurring at the same time. One is a matana, one is a Yerusha. What's the halach when you have two transactions occurring at the same time? One is a Yerusha, one is a matana. The Gemara says, V'chol lezeb Yerusha lezeb matana, afilu rabbanan modu. Let's say, in a case, even if it's two parcels and two people, but one is getting Yerusha, one is getting matana, what does the halacha say? The whole thing is framed as a matana. So we'll say, so it turns out that Benin Dichrin is not a Yerusha, it's a matana, because ultimately it's happening at the same time as Benos Nukvin, and whenever you have Lezeb Yerusha, Zeb matana, everything becomes framed as a matana. To which the Gemara says, Amrli Rav Nuchumi v'is da'amar Rav Chananya bar Minyumi la'abaye. 1 second, hold up, I'm a base. Mimai debechad beidin eskin. 1 second, you are assuming that there is Tanai Beis Din simultaneity happening over here. In other words, you're making it sound like that Benos Nukvin and, or I should say, Benin Dichrin and Benos Nukvin are happening at the same time. Who says? In other words, who says? It sounds like that one Beis Din is being attacking both of these, and that they're being instituted. Who says? Who says everything is happening by the same Beis Din? Who says everything happens at the same time? Dilma betray Beidin Eskin. Maybe it was instituted in two different Batei Din. The rich Gemara said, "Lo, Sa'adaytra Diktani Reisha Ze Medrash Dar Shabbalazav and Azariah Fnei Chachamim Bekerem Biyavne." No, this is what they darshan. This is what Shabbalazav and Azariah darshan from the Chachamim Bekerem Biyavne. Habanim Yirshu v'Habanos Yizonu. It was instituted at the same time. So now what that means is they were instituted at the same time, which means that again there is Tanai Beis Din simultaneity that happens. Which means that whenever a man gets married and writes a ksuva for his wife, whether he writes or he doesn't write, it doesn't matter. There are two takanas that simultaneously vest: Benos Dichrin and Benin Dichrin and Benos Nukvin. And even though one is Yerusha, one is a matana, because one is a matana, that matana overshadows everything and makes everything essentially like a halachic matana. So the Gemara says, Ma banim einon yarshin el liachar misa savian. I'm sorry. Ma banim einon yarshin el liachar misa savian. Af banos lo yizonu el liachar misa savian. So the Gemara says, so if that's the case, we should say that just like the sons only get their Yerusha after the death of the father, so to the daughter should only get support after the death of the father as well. So first wide line, iskin. So if you say that halacha l'maisa, everything was instituted in one Beis Din, then I understand why they're learning out one takana from the other. But if you hold that they're being instituted in two different Batei Din, how can you learn out one takana from the other? To which the Gemara says, Mimai, Maybe they were instituted into different Batei Din. Ubei Dina Basra takun kabei Dina Kamo. And ultimately the latter Beis Din went ahead and instituted it based on the earlier Beis Din. In order that there shouldn't be a contradiction between one Beis Din and another Beis Din. Okay, so we'll say, so just historically, just as an aside, there seems to be a machlokas about whether or not Benin Dichrin and Benos Nukvin, were they two separate takonas made at two separate times, right? Two takonas made at the same time, or maybe even if they were two takonas made at two separate times, they were modeled one after the other. Okay, so that historical debate is not resolved. In the same way that our original question is not resolved either. Which we're going to say, remember, how did we start this entire exciting journey? Right? What was our question? We had Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka set up in the Mishnah as dealing with Ishchiv Mira. Now suddenly, what did the Gemara ask? Does Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka work even with a healthy father? What's the answer? The Gemara doesn't seem to fully answer that question. So we come to the Rambam. So the Rambam writes in Hilchos Zichia Matana, Halacha Perikid Beis Halacha. Both say, first of all, do we pass like Rabbi Yochanan in general? That's really that's the core question. So the answer to that is yes. Watch this. Shchiv Mera Sha'amar Bini Ploni Yirasheni. Okay, so I want to be very careful over here, right? Generally, whenever we talk about Shchiv Mera, when I say Shchiv Mera, you think dead. That's the best you can do, right? Deathbed, really? That's all? Okay, good. Hey, so Shchiv, true. But when I Shchiv Mera, you think Matana. That's really the way it works, right? Yeah, I'm going to condition it. For now, I'm just going to I'm going to tell you what you're thinking. I'm going to tell you what you're thinking, right? So when I say Shchiv Mera, you think excellent. Wow, incredible. I got very good. Catching on over here. So I'll say why? Because that's the power. Remember again, the reason I'm saying that because the entire power of a Shchiv Mera is to convey property with no formal kinyanim. Right? That's the chab. In general, in life, you want to give something to someone, there's a mechanism to it. Right? I say, you know what? I want to give you $1 million. I'm feeling so good today. Here, I'm telling you, I'm giving you $1 million. What is the power of that statement? What's the power of that statement? Nothing. Nothing. Again, okay, there is some power. Motzah sasecha tishmar. When you see something, you should honor it. But halachically, again, there are mechanisms of kinyanim. The greatest chiddush of a Shchiv Mera is that a Shchiv Mera can convey property just by word. Shchiv Mera says, I want to give this to this, this to this, this to that. Remember again, why? Because divrei Shchiv Mera kiksuvin v'chimsurin damu. The words of a Shchiv Mera are like they are written and given over. That's the power of Shchiv Mera. So I want to point out, that's not this case. We're talking about a Shchiv Mera who is now arranging his estate and is identifying what he wants to happen with his inheritance, with the estate when he dies. This is not a deathbed gift. So watch this. So Shchiv Mera Shamar Ploni, Bini Ploni Yerasheni. So Shchiv Mera says, my son, alright, so let's say again, we're talking about Yakov. Yakov has 3 sons. No Bechar. He has a firstborn daughter. He's got 3 sons, Reuven, Shimon, Levi. So what does Reuven say? What does Yakov say in his deathbed? I want Shimon, my son, to inherit everything. What's the halacha? Hare ze yoresh oso levado, velo yirashuhu shar habanim. It works. That's Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. Where does a father get that right from? Pasuk, biyom hanchilo es banov. A father has a right to decide where the inheritance goes. Now again, what's the caveat? He's got to assign it to someone who is in the inheritance chain. That's the way it works. But again, he has the ability to give it to one of the kids. V'chein, im amar ala bas bein habanos, o ach beina achin o shereshin. Similarly again, let's say Yakov had only daughters. He could assign the inheritance. Now normally if Yakov would die, then all of his daughters would inherit. If he says, I want daughter A to inherit, she inherits everything. Now again, remember, what can't Yakov do? What can't he do? He can't disrupt the apple cart on the normal progression of inheritance. So if he has sons and daughters, he can't cut out his sons and give everything to his daughters. If there's a Bechar, he can't grab the Bechar, the Pishnayim, and he can't go ahead and say, you know what, I'm leaving my entire estate to my best friend, Joe, and not leaving anything to my kids. That you can't do. Again, you could do it as a gift. But again, assuming that we're working on normal inheritance, Shabbos says, therefore, again, Yaakov on his deathbed could say, when I die, I want my estate inheritance-wise to go to one of my sons, and it works. However, Aval habari ein dvarav kayamin. It doesn't. It only works with the shchiv Meira. Does not work with a healthy father. Again, the Kesef Mishnah, or Lecha Mishnah explains why is that. It's very simple. Because the pasuk itself, Biyoman Chilo Esbanav, indicates to us we're talking about a father who is in the parsha of bequeathing. When are you in the parsha of bequeathing? When you're dying. When you're dying. So we'll say, so we pass like Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, but it only works for a shchid meira, doesn't work for a healthy father. Incredible. Let's spend a few more moments. Let's go right there. Says the Gemara. Exciting. Just exciting. So the Gemara says as follows: Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Hakosev kol mechasav leishto. This is an interesting case. So let's say, right, Yakov is married to Rachel, and Yakov has sons, got children, right? And what happens? He writes his entire estate to his wife. If you look at the Rashbam, it's actually right across. The Rashbam says, Hakosev kol mechasav leishto belashon matana. Right? Because we'll say, obviously, again, this can't be Yerusha, right? Why can't it be Yerusha? Because, again, she's not an inheritor. So, obviously, again, so what is he doing? So, Yaakov is married to Rachel. He says, I hereby gift my entire estate to Rachel. So, we'll say, so, now, here's the interesting part. So, now, what do we do with a statement like that? So, at least Shmuel says, Lo asaha ela apetropa. He has... So again, he did not mean to convey ownership there. Rather, what has he done? He's made her the executor of the estate. She's the executor of the estate. Now look at the Rashbam for just a moment. What's the logic that she's the executor? The only hadashu the ein adam maniach hezbana benosin akol ishto. V'lo niskaven el lazos apetropa kedei sheachlok ula banav kavod mishum da'uki avia nechase b'shusei lefarnasam mehem k'fi omei daita v'kfufim la. Supposed to say this is incredible. Now, why is that? So now, right, let's play this out. So Yaakov is married to Rachel. Yaakov says, I hereby gift my entire estate to Rachel. Shmuel says, no. He's not gifting the estate. What is he doing? He's making her the executor. Now, what's the logic behind it? The logic behind that is because we assume a father is not going to cut out his children from inheritance. It's not done. So why did he give her the estate? Because what is Yaakov concerned about? What is he concerned about? He's concerned about that when he dies, you could especially imagine this even more in a case where, let's say, Rachel is not the mother of Yaakov's children, right? So what is Yaakov concerned about? He's concerned that the children are not going to take care of his widow. So what does he do? He leaves her in charge of the estate. Now, because she's in charge of the estate, guess what's going to happen? The kids are going to be very respectful, right, and very caring for her, which makes sense because the power of the purse strings. In other words, she has the money. She has the money. So therefore, again, a lot of things happening over here. It's Yaakov worried about the fact that after he's gone, he wants to make sure that his wife is taken care of. But a father is not going to cut his kids out of the estate. So instead, we just view it as him leaving her in charge of the... So the gift is meant to give her executor powers, but is not really meant as a gift of ownership. Incredible. So the Gemara goes right there. So the Gemara says, Lo asa ala p'tropa, pshita b'no hagadol, lo asa ala apetropis. Similarly again, let's say again, Reuven left his entire estate to his oldest son. So again, once again, I will say, we assume that what's happening over there is, the Gemara is operating under the following idea, that sometimes a person would gift their estate to someone in order for the other members of the family to respect that person. I will say it's interesting. In other words, things don't change all that much. What do people respect? People respect money. So therefore, again, the same thing in the wife. If the wife has the power of the estate, the kids will respect her. So if a father, Yaakov, leaves his estate ultimately to the oldest son, once again, we assume that a father is not cutting out his kids from the estate. So why is he leaving it to the Bechar? Because he wants the younger brothers to respect the older brother. That's what's happening over here. Next, what about the following case? Pshita b'noah katan mai. So we'll say, what happens if Yaakov has multiple sons? Right? Yaakov has multiple sons, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. And then what happens? He leaves his estate to Levi. He gifts the estate to Levi. So what is that? So the Gemara says, now we'll say, here's what's interesting. When he leaves it to the older brother, I understand that. Why? Because the younger brothers are obligated to respect the older brother. Remember again, we'll say this is a drasha, kabit es avicha ve'es imecha. Es is always a ribui. And the Gemara says, Es comes to include the rabbos, Achicha hagadol. Younger siblings have an obligation, right, to honor their older siblings. So therefore, again, I understand that Yakov leaves his money to Ruvain, not because he's cutting the other kids out of the estate, but because he wants the younger siblings to respect Ruvain. What happens if, let's say, again, Yakov has 3 sons, Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi, and he gifts the entire estate to Levi? What is that? So the Gemara says, so itma Rav Chanilai, bar Idi Amar Shmuel, afilu b'no hakatan amutal ba'arisa. Even if he leaves it ultimately again to the youngest son in the cradle. Now, what is that? And take a look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam says that it's in the wide lines, about 10 lines in. Afilu katan amutal ba'arisa, rotzu b'chvodo, v'lo asal apatropa. We assume that just the father's intention with this is that he wants the other sons to respect the youngest kid, and really he's making the youngest son an apotropos and not really meaning to gift it to him. So we'll say, you see this pattern that whenever the father gifts property to one of the children, he doesn't mean for that child ultimately again. Now, there are certain clear cases. In the case of the oldest brother, it's clear he wants the oldest brother to have control over the money, not ownership. Control over it. This way the younger siblings will respect him. Even if he gives it to the younger sibling, we view that ultimately again as the father's way of getting the older kids to respect the youngest one. But in no way does he mean to convey ownership, sole ownership, to one of the children. We're working under the assumption that a father is not cutting any of his kids out of the estate. And therefore, when he gives ownership of the estate to one of the kids, he means to give it to them as an apotropos, right? As an executor, and not as ownership. Incredible. So, pshita benova acher. So let's say again, a father goes ahead and allocates estate, ultimately again, to a son and to someone else. So what's the halacha? Acher b'matana, to someone else it must be as a matana, ubeno apotropos, and ultimately again to his son as an apotropos. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. Pshita benova acher, kilomar pshita li, shakol seif kol mechasav libno, shekara lo yoser mikol krova, v'yotzer b'chvodo yoser, or akol seif kol mechasav la'acher, delo chayav b'chvodo, b'chlal hani shnayim pshita li, da'amr b'makom banim, mishum, so I'll say something that's that side. So in other words, obviously, if someone's going ahead and giving and gifting his estate to someone unrelated, that's a matana. That's a gift, right? Because again, the whole apotropos card, right? We'll say, why does the apotropos conversation come up? Why does it come up? Ultimately, again, because in a family dynamic, the father may be worried about other family members not respecting a particular family member. What is the best way to ensure that the family member in doubt gets the respect that he or she deserves? What's the best way to ensure that? Give them the money. Give them control over the money. So give the wife control over the money. The kids will respect her. Give the older brother control over the money. Kids will respect him. Give the younger brother the money. Kids will respect him. But if it's someone unrelated to the family, then there's no respect issue. If there's no respect issue, then the only way we can look at it ultimately again is as a matana. Okay, ishto arusa, the ishto grusha. Similarly, again, I will say, let's say a man gifts his property to his wife who's in arusa or to his ex-wife. So once again, in these cases, there's no covet issue, right? In other words, a man is not worried about the covet due to his erusin wife because they're not living together. They're not fully married. I mean, they're fully married, right? But Lamaisa, again, she's not in his household. So therefore, there's no covet issue. So the only reason he'd be giving it to her is why? Because he wants to give it to her. He wants her to own it. Same thing, ex-wife, right? There's no covet issue involved in the ex-wife. And therefore, if he gives her property, why is he giving it to her? Why is he giving it to her? As a matana. Ibayluhu. Bein Eitzel Abanim. You know what I'll say? We'll stop over for today. We'll pick up Am Yisroel with the Ibayluhu tomorrow. Shkoyach. What a start to the week. Incredible, I'll say.